the 1960s, the celebration of Black History Month continues. Pittsburgh celebrates with exhilarating exhibits featuring From Slavery to Freedom and fascinating oral histories and comic book histories.
Black History Month was initiated by Carter G. Woodson. But Woodson's idea was that February would be the time of the year in which there will be focus on Black history. Black History Month is celebrated all over the world.
Explore more than 250 years of African American history in the Heinz History Center From Slavery to Freedom exhibit, highlighting the anti-slavery movement and the Underground Railroad.
From Slavery to Freedom is a long-term exhibit. The exhibit is broken down into roughly about 10 different sections, subject sections. It begins in Africa. And one of the reasons why we begin in Africa is that in terms of teaching, especially a younger generation, a 21st generation group of students, to let them know that slavery is not synonymous with being African. The second section deals with the transatlantic slave trade. So that big circle is actually a giant shackle. You can see the chain on one side of it. And what it symbolizes in the exhibition is the beginning of the enslavement of people of African descent. And it tells a story in that whole slave ship section because you're sort of at the bottom of a slave ship. That section also gives you two figures, a young man of around 17 years of age and a young woman on a platform above the doorway who's around 12 years of age. And that depicts the average age for male and female on these slave ships. How do I educate 21st century students with this antebellum history? And so I felt the best way to do it is to use 21st century technology. And so we came up with the idea to develop touchscreen interactives that will focus on 5 Underground Railroad safe houses in Pittsburgh. They include the Monongahela House Hotel. They include Martin Delaney's home. They include John Vachon's barbershop, the Thomas Bigham House, and the Dr. Francis Lemoyne House in Washington County. Those were all places where Underground Railroad activities had taken place in Pittsburgh and Washington County. That's the section of the exhibition that begins almost an exclusive discussion on Pittsburgh. That section of the exhibit is a section of slavery and abolitionism. So on the right side of the gallery are Pittsburgh slaveholders, General O'Hare, Conrad Weinbittel, and others. And on the right side of the gallery are abolitionists, Charles Avery, Martin Delaney, and then some artifacts related to the abolitionist movement. Martin Delaney was born free, actually, in Charlestown, Virginia, which is in Jefferson County, near Harper's Ferry, Virginia, in 1812. He was a literate person. He was taught to read and write. He was born free because his mother was free. Slavery in America was based on the condition of your mother.
Over at the City County building, the city celebrates, beyond the funny pages, the work of Pittsburgh's African-American comic artists.
Comic book history is a new market of history. To me, comic books capture what was going on at that time in a snapshot. This is the first time ever that we've displayed something like that in a city building. The first exhibit that we're going to go through is the Jackie Ormus exhibit. Zelda Jackie Orms, one of her best ones for me is Ginger and Patty Joe, which is a younger sister and an older sister who lived together through happenstance. No one actually knows how they live together, but they live together. And the older one actually is taking care of her, but the younger one is the actual one, or Patty Jo's actually does all the talking. Ginger never does any of the talking. Warren Evans is the next artist that we're actually displaying here at the City County building. One of the ones that we're highlighting is the Ace Harlem comic, which is a detective comic, which gives you an idea of what he was trying to accomplish. The first thing he was trying to accomplish was to put African Americans in a better light than what they've been shown before, by making sure they were well dressed in a leadership position, that they gave an explanation, an idea of what they're trying to do. And one of the other things that he showed in this comic was that the actual detective who's in charge of other police officers, you never see the police officers with a gun. They solve the crime with their actual intelligence on how to get stuff across, finding clues and doing different other methods. Even the criminals are shown in stylish dress and in popular things at those times to show a level of sophistication that the artists were trying to get across. This last exhibit is on Clarence Matthew Baker. He's probably one of my favorite artists that actually displayed during this time. One of his first things that he got displayed in was Canton Kate, where he actually got to put his name on the cover. And that was like his breakout for a lot of things that he did, along with the Phantom Lady, which is on the other side of this panel. One of his ones that probably caught my eye was probably the Phantom Lady, because it was a parallel to Batman, and that was one of the things that I liked about it. People say one of his greatest things that he contributed was his ability to create a beautiful woman. In a lot of his captions, if you watch, a lot of his women are heroic or in leadership positions. So at this time, he kind of he was like spearheading the women's right movement in comics, basically.
The voices of Pittsburgh's legendary African Americans will live on in PNC's Oral History exhibit.
This is the oral history component. There are 12 prominent African Americans in this group. As you see, it comes down the wall to the circle on the floor. So this is Wendell Freeland, who just passed away on January 23rd, sadly. So it's nice that we were able to interview him. We have Alma Speed Fox, who's a civil rights advocate. She was with the NAACP, was really prominent in the women's rights movement as well.
When I came to Pittsburgh in 1949, there were restaurants lined up all down Highland Avenue, Penn Avenue, and I wasn't allowed to go into those restaurants. I wasn't allowed to go into the bar.
And then we have Dimitri Bicella, who is the founder of Utopia Model Agency and the Fashion Africana event.
My interest in fashion began probably when I was maybe 5 years old. I've always had an interest in design, and I have always been creative and artistic. But I grew up with a very low self-esteem.
They're all about 2 minutes in length. They're short. And Andrew Stockey from WTAE does the intros on all the oral histories.
The Pittsburgh Courier and its sister newspaper, the New Pittsburgh Courier, have been documenting the African American experience since 1907.
So he kind of sets everything up so that you understand what you're about to hear. But it's interesting how the oral histories kind of feed their own stories and kind of generate their own stories, because the folks that are participating are opening up and they're sharing and they're, in many cases, divulging really personal information.